Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to this very special bonus episode with Johanna Rothman. In this episode, we dive into the world of effective project management. Hi Johanna, welcome to the show.
Hi Vasco, thank you so much for having me. I am delighted to be here.
Absolutely, the pleasure is all ours. And we're eager to hear and talk a lot about the new book you just wrote, Project Life Cycles, which you describe as a start at the ending of fake agility and introduction of real agility. For all of you out there that may not know Johanna yet, I'm sure you will definitely read many of her other books, which you can find at jrothman.com. She's an authority in the software development world, and she's the author of the book we'll explore today, but also a lot of other books that you can check at jrothman.com. And I'll put the link on the show notes so you can easily find it. She has a lot of experience with Agile and helps demystify complex concepts and guide, in this particular book, project managers to lead with adaptability. So, Johanna, let's start with that. Let's start with the book and what triggered you. Why did you decide to start? What was your initial goal and your trigger to write this book?
So I've been working with teams and managers on, managers on the portfolio, teams on their Agile approach. And some teams are saying, do I start with Scrum? Do I start with Kanban? Can I integrate them? And I almost always say, it really doesn't matter as long as a team collaborates on just a few items at a time and they release frequently so they get the feedback. They get the feedback to themselves so they can improve. They get the feedback to from the customers so they can see, do we want to go in this direction or that direction? I mean, to me, it's all about the feedback loops. And when I was working with, I think 3 or 4 teams last year, all of them had people they called Scrum Masters who were really command and control project managers. They were not facilitating the teams. And I said, and part of it was they had 18-month-long backlogs. I mean, 18 months. I don't know what I'm doing next month. And I'm a small organization. How can they possibly tell? And they were assigning work to people in the planning meeting, individuals, not even, I understand if you have a 12 or 15 person team, maybe you want to say, is anybody going to work as a subset on these couple of items and anybody else work as a subset on these couple of items? I can sort of understand that if you have a larger team. No, these people were assigning items and tasks to individuals.
Talk about micromanaging.
This is nothing like Scrum. And then everybody wanted to know, why is Agile so terrible? Well, it's not Agile is so terrible. It's that they were doing old-fashioned project management, command and control that never actually worked. So that's why I wrote this book. Because, well, if you cannot use a really Agile approach, you can still incorporate agility into any approach, except maybe for Waterfall.
Incorporating agility to any approach is indeed quite a challenge, but also a worthy goal. And talking about agility, in the book you talk about the concept of fake agility. Introduce that to us. What do you mean in this book? What do you mean by fake agility?
So that whole notion of fake agility is where we don't get the benefit of working in flow efficiency thinking, right? We are so focused on the individual and watching the people do their work. We're not focused on the flow of work through the team. Now, the whole idea of flow efficiency, I don't bother measuring that. That's not useful for me. But I want to measure the WIP, the work in progress for the team, because the more work they have in progress, the increased their cycle time and the lower the throughput. Right? Nobody can violate Little's law. There's no way to do it. So let's just go with Little's law and say, what does it make sense for us as a team to reduce our WIP, our work in progress, so we increase our throughput and decrease our cycle time?
Yeah, that's worth highlighting here. So Little's law basically says that your throughput is gonna be directly affected by how much work in progress you have, right? And of course, people can go and check out the Wikipedia page. I'll put the link on the show notes for you to investigate that further if you like. But it's a relationship that has been proven. Any queuing system will follow Little's law, and a team developing from a backlog is literally a queuing system. And how come we still don't understand that? Like, is that what you mean by fake agility, like trying to apply concepts without understanding them?
Well, it's partially that, but it's partially the idea that if we have a stand-up, we're agile. I'm not sure where you are on the stand-up loving or hating, but I want a stand-up that allows us to reconnect and recommit to each other what we're doing. I don't want a status report stand-up. And Agile has nothing to, the only practice in the Agile manifesto is that of a retrospective. That's the only required, if I can even put that in quotes, practice. So why do people think that a stand-up or estimating on story points is as part of the Agile manifesto? It's not. And I think story points, while they might have been useful all those years ago, are not going to answer the question, when will it be done? And that's the question every manager has. And the only answer to that is to assess the cycle time for the team and say, how much do we normally have as a cycle time? What's in or out of our normal bounds? And then we can count the stories. Or we can actually start doing the work and saying,
but of course, starting to do the work requires a certain mindset and the ability to not only focus on what we're doing right now, like reducing the WIP, the work in process, of course, but also understanding how we can adapt. So we still need some vision of the future, right? So when we talk about agility, and I think this is a worthwhile question to explore a little bit, is we are really balancing the long-term perspective. We talk about product vision, for example, with the short-term execution, recognizing that execution is necessarily always short-term, even though it needs to be guided by long-term principles, right? So how do you bring that to your clients? Because it is almost like a paradox, right? The more long-term planning we are focused, the less we can follow the long-term plan. And that's kind of the paradox of it.
Right. So what I've been saying to people for years and years is have that long-term vision. Understand who the customers are. Understand the problems you want to solve for those customers. Now, think in terms of small steps. What's the first thing you could deliver? Well, probably conceive and deliver to execute on that long-term goal. And so I write books. Books are my product. So are workshops and other things. And I always have an idea of the architecture of the book. Always, always, always. And at least a third of the way into the book, I have to re-architect the entire book. And that's just a book, right? That's 50 or 60,000 words. You would not think I would have to re-architect it. But the best books, we always learn something as we write. This is exactly the same thing in product development. We learn as we go. Why not allow for the learning? Why not keep that long-term vision for the product, for the strategy, while we shorten the feedback loops in our execution? The more we shorten our feedback loops in our execution, the more we can say, oh, do we really want that as a product vision, as a product goal? Do we want to change that? Because we recognize the market has changed from when we created our big plans. The smaller we start off in our deliveries, the more able we are to use agility to say, oh, I want to change that thing.
So when we start exploring this fake agility, of course, we have by contrast to ask, so in your mind, what is that essence, of true agility? Well, what do you, in your mind, your experience and in the work that you've done, what stands out in this true agility that is different from the fake agility you talk about and describe in the book?
So I really like to think about true agility as, how do we deliver something small so we get feedback on it? And the way we deliver something small is by collaboration. So we don't have me doing my task and Vasco doing your task and all these other people doing their tasks. We might do that in a day or two, but not for an entire iteration, right? We focus on, how do we move through the architecture to deliver something valuable, either to us as a team or to our customers, right? I really like internal deliveries at least once a day and external deliveries as often as possible. Some of my clients really cannot do external deliveries more often than once a month. I'm working with them on that, but they can deliver every single day inside the organization. And that often gives them enough feedback so they can adjust where they're going. This business of planning where you're going and not deviating from it, I don't even understand that. That never, ever worked.
Yeah, and the ability to benefit from these deviations, as we were just talking about, deviating from the initial list of questions as we were starting to record this, the ability to benefit from, take advantage of those deviations is, I think, also one of the key aspects that we want to see in true agile organizations and teams. So in your experience, what are the things, the ingredients that need to be there for teams and organizations to be able to first spot them and then to learn to take advantage of these deviations or surprises that come up as they start developing their products?
So I really like thinking about, how do we think about change as a team? Let's start off at the team level, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that the organization needs to have as a culture. But if we only in quotes, address the team capabilities, I think we are in great shape. So if the team can say, how do we benefit from learning? How do we benefit from de-risking the rest of our work? And de-risking the rest of our work is not creating the schema for the database. No, de-risking the rest of our work is doing 1, 2, or 3 very small experiments so we can see, where do we think we will have more risk later? What have we learned from these experiments to incorporate into our learning? One of the reasons I use either a 1-week time box in my work and then replanning is because I learned something in the really tough weeks, I learned something every day. But I always learn something at least once a week that will change my plans, not where I want to go, right? Not my long-term vision, but how I will get there. And the more teams can say, how can we create adaptable planning, the more likely they are to have agility. And the way you create adaptable planning is by reducing your WIP, by collaborating on all the work you have to do, and with a retrospective, right? So how often can you finish something and learn from it, and then go on and do the next thing, incorporating all that learning?
And that learning is, for me, one of the things that I see a lot of people struggling with, and of course I recognize I was struggling with it in my career as well, and I still do, because not only does it challenge us, but it also starts to, I mean, a very common thing is, and you get, especially for you and me who are in the public eye all the time, you get imposter syndrome, right? I can't make a mistake. What will people think? But I think that there, we Agilists at least need to lead by example and show, yes, it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes we get things wrong and then we, learn and improve and get them better, right? But talking to someone whose job, at least in their minds, may depend on the plan being right. I'm talking about project managers here, and I was a project manager way back in the day. I know how that feels. Like, how do we help these clients understand that it is okay to make mistakes as long as we are able to kind of, limit the blast radius, as it were, and that requires a set of practices, and what are those, and so on. But how do you work with your clients to get them to grasp that idea?
So part of it is I refer them to the Modern Management Made Easy books, and I say to them, the more you can say, I was wrong and I need help to figure out what the next thing is, the more you give other people permission to say, oh, I was wrong too. How can we learn faster, right? So it's not about this whole business of failing fast. I don't want to fail at all, but I want to learn early. So one of the things I say to the teams I coach and the various leaders in the organization is, how fast can you learn? Yeah, you made a mistake. Fine, people make mistakes. You have several choices. You could beat yourself up about it, or you can say, how can I kind of hitch my pants up and go on to the next thing? I find I really hate making mistakes. I really, really do. And I make them all the time. So I take this attitude of, I was not an imposter by design. I made a mistake. I don't have to feel shame about that. I can go on and say, who do I need to ask for help to make this a better experience overall? What do I need to learn from this?
So being able to learn, and also being candid, and of course seeking help, but also learning how to take advantage of being wrong, because it's how does it say? How do you say? It's the universe gives you a gift of being wrong, and then you decide to feel bad about it or take advantage of it, right? So that is one big part of understanding and grasping really the Agile mindset. How else do you talk to your teams and the project managers you work with to help them understand the difference between Agile and traditional, especially waterfall-ish, if not waterfall completely, project management?
So this is where I see people with the Agile names for things doing waterfall. And I say to them, what's the first thing you need this team to do? And they often say, oh, we need 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I say, no. What's number 1? Almost everybody knows number 1. They might not know 2, 3, and 4, but they know number 1. And that's when I say to them, okay, let's take number 1 as a feature. And if it's an entire feature set, or you might call it an epic or a theme, I still call it a feature set. What's the first piece of value the customer needs, or what's the first piece of value the team needs, and do only that, only plan that, only do that, and do it as a team. And that's when people often discover they have 2 months of work in this one thing. So now, but now we only have this one thing. So now we say, okay, what's the very first thing you need to do? And they move from 2 months of work down to one, down to 2 weeks, down to 1 week. And then I start to work with them on how do you split this so it's really a day or two of value that the team can do in a day or two. Now we talk about collaboration, not the front end person and the back end person and the middleware people. No, it's all how do we do this one thing through the architecture and deliver that? Now we start to have a more agile approach.
And that question, what's the one thing that you need to do first, as you illustrated in this example, is really a recursive question, right? And what I encourage my teams to do is go down to the level of one day. What's the one thing you need to do today? And you can start from wherever, but as long as you get to the one day, then you're progressing, right? Like you're delivering something of value, even if it is as small as one day. Now, in the book, the Project Life Cycles book, you explore different life cycles. Which ones, we can talk about all of them, of course, but which ones are more likely to fit an agile approach? And of course, also by contrast, which ones would probably not fit an agile approach?
So let's start with the agile approaches. The incremental life cycles, where you deliver something either by value or by time on a fairly regular basis, right? So incremental is great. Then there are the combination life cycles where you choose how to iterate and you choose how to increment. And the faster you can deliver an increment of value, that allows for more agility. So I often work with teams who say, well, we need to do 2 weeks of design so we understand the architecture. And I say to them, could you do 1 day of design? I mean, really, if you all collaborate on it, I understand wanting an architecture that feels more stable and more solid. But my experience is we still need to do at least 2 or 3 or 4 features to really see if that architecture works. So how little can you do on that 1 day of design and then go to starting to implement features? And then how fast can you reassess that architecture? I find that when people realize they have permission to use a day or two of architecture, or even, God forbid, 2 weeks, or 2 weeks of getting requirements or all that stuff, the more you can reduce all that upfront work, the more likely you can move into an agile approach. But I'm sure you see this too. You see waterfall scrum, water scrum fall, right? Where people do 3 months of requirements. They have a product requirements document. Then they move into Scrum. They realize the requirements are not quite right. They have to do all this change and craziness. And then they can even deploy. So, okay.
And with the requirements, I mean, the thing that even shocks me still today, and it is 2024, right? The Agile Manifest is from the late 90s. So, yeah. or 2001, sorry, and Scrum is from the 90s. And we're still doing 1 year of requirements and then complaining that a 3-month project is late.
Right. Yeah, I mean, okay, let me not rant on that. So anything that has an incremental delivery is more likely to be more agile than anything without an incremental delivery. Now, I do say that you might be able to make a waterfall project work if it's only about a month long and maybe 2 or 3 people. But I have never seen, I've been working since 1977. I have the gray hair to prove it. I have never seen a large and long waterfall project work. Never, never.
And it so often already starts in the wrong foot because it starts with people making schedules before the team is even hired.
Oh,
So
yeah.
how can they be right about the schedule, one should ask. All right, but you also talk about other things in your book. So I want to explore especially one thing that I really liked and I found quite insightful, which is this concept of portfolio-based risks as opposed to project-based risks. Mm-hmm. So give us, the ABC, I should say, of that concept. How can we learn to take into account those portfolio-based risks instead of focusing on individual project risks, which is something I still see a lot out there?
So I learned about this when I did a little consulting for a small startup in San Francisco. They were still trying to figure out, are we a product company or a services company? And they wanted their services to fund the product, right? They wanted to be a product company. And I said to them, but they were taking all these service-based contracts to fund this product. And of course, their customers wanted a little bit over here and a little bit over there and something over here and something over there, which is very typical in an early market product. Right. You cannot cross the chasm until you have kind of this ground effect of enough customers wanting enough of the same features. So I said to them, how often do you reassess your portfolio and your strategy? And they said, and and I said, okay, you need to reassess your portfolio much more frequently than you are looking right now. Otherwise, you will continue to take all these services contracts and not actually have a product. I found exactly the other problem, the opposite problem, several years ago. There were, I don't know, 20 senior leaders in an organization with 2 product development teams. With all these senior leaders, they had more projects than the company could possibly do. And the teams were not particularly, well, the teams claimed they were using an agile approach. They were not. Their cycle time tended to be a couple of weeks. So they could only release one feature every couple of weeks. That's not long. That's way too long for effective portfolio management when the senior leadership wants to change everything every 2 weeks, right? So we have these opposite problems, all based on high organizational WIP, all based on insufficient throughput and a very high cycle time. So the same problems exhibit themselves in different ways.
And I really like how you equated the different rates of change, right? You were talking about this group of leaders who was changing the portfolio way more often than the team could react to. But one of the things that struck me is that, well, but that means that the rate of change of portfolio level needs to be synchronized in some way with the rate of change at the team level, whereby the team level rate of change needs to be higher, if not twice, probably faster, right? It needs to be a much faster throughput than what the portfolio level can take. Otherwise, managers effectively have no decision power because it ends up being that the software is running the company, not the company running the software.
Right, and that makes it very hard for anyone to plan anything, right? The teams can't plan for next week because senior leadership wants to change something, but the team isn't done, which was the problem they hired me to solve. but then I discovered all these other problems. So it's a really I mean, I discussed this in the project portfolio book, but I think it's really important to see how all these dynamics change in the team, in for the product leader, and in the portfolio.
Now, there's a lot of other topics in the book, and I would encourage everybody to check out the Project Life Cycles book. The link will be on the show notes so that you can easily find it. In the last chapter of the book, though, so to take the last topic related to the book, in the last chapter of the book, you talk about how to increase agility in any approach, which I think highlights some of the core elements of Agile as you propose it. So what are some of those key approaches to bringing agility to our projects?
Well, first, see and understand your unplanned feedback loops. Right. If something surprises you on a regular basis, right, you thought you were doing this feature for this reason and you realize you're not, that means your feedback loops are probably too long. Where can you use shorter time boxes? So maybe you're using an approach like Scrum. I hope that most people are using 2-week time boxes for planning and implementing work. But maybe you want to use a shorter time box for any other kinds of planning, any other revisiting of the product backlog. Right. Instead of saying, how much can we do? I see a lot of push planning in my clients. They say, how much can we do in 2 weeks? I would much rather say, how little can we do that the customers really need, that we really need, and then how fast can we learn? Right? I find that that's really helpful. That allows us to deliver and demo on a regular basis. If you have a team that's not demoing regularly, you are missing out on an opportunity to learn. Way back in the late 90s, I think one of my clients asked me, how do we keep senior leadership engaged? I said, demo, right? Demo what you have. And that's when we discovered they were trying to use a strict waterfall instead of implementing by feature on a regular basis. So I introduced those ideas then, and they said, our senior leadership now has a lot of input to, to what we're doing. And I said, is this a bad thing? And they said, well, no, but they're really engaged. I said, exactly. This is how you keep them engaged. Demos really help they help the team figure out what did we do and not do, but they really keep everybody else engaged. So this idea of delivering and demoing, I think is really, really important. And then if I can add one more thing, this cross-functional or multifunctional team from start to end, right? If you have all the functions you need to deliver your product, and you start with all those people and you end with all those people, you are much more likely to increase your agility. Now, can you change out certain people? Of course, people retire, they go on vacation, they want a new product. That's totally fine as long as you have a way to integrate new people onto your team, right? Every team needs to be able to deal with that kind of change. So how can you do that? But start with the people you need, end with the people you need.
So this increasing agility is the theme of my the question I will add to all of the interviews for 2024, and this is about exploring what agility would look like if we were able to do all the things that we think are important, right? So the question is, what do you think Agile looks like when we push the current practice, and I don't mean the bad practice, of course, I mean the good practice. When we push the current practices all the way to 11, And of course, by current practice here, I mean the best you've seen out there in the real world.
So when we push it all to 11, I see really satisfied teams who are really, really engaged with their work. Oh, they still have arguments and disagreements, and Johanna wants to do this, maybe Vasco wants to do that. That's totally fine, right? But we have a way to collaborate. We make each other better with our discussions, with our concerns, with our challenges. And that whole business of making each other better, that means that we work to ramp up everybody's capabilities as individuals and as a team. So when people say to me, I am very old, I will just give you that. So when people said to me back when I was learning C or C++ or something like that, they said, I know you like your spaces or indentations like that, Johanna, but your code is different from everybody else's code. It makes it more difficult to read. And we spend most of our time reading code, not writing it. So could you please agree with us on how we use our spaces and indentations? And I thought, after I expletive deleted in my head, I said, okay, fine, I will, because that's a team norm. And if I agree to collaborate with these people in our team norms, I make everybody better. And that's when people finally said to me, oh, I see what you're doing now. That's kind of clever. I want you to give us a little education on why you're doing it that way. That's because I came from Lisp was my first OO language. C++ was my second. Yeah. So I have a strange background. It's totally fine. And that means, but now then I can explain to people why I coded this way and why I designed this way. And we can all have a discussion of how that worked or did not work for us in this new product.
Which is another type of feedback loops that we should not ignore. Because we can benefit a lot from it. Johanna, we're getting close to the end. Please do check out the book, Project Life Cycles. I'll put the link in the show notes so you can easily find it. It's one of Johanna's many books. I have lost count on how many books about Agile project management, and also some fiction books that you can check out at jrothman.com. But Johanna, where else can people find you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
So aside from that, I'm on Mastodon, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on LinkedIn. I try to post something on LinkedIn every day, and I will give you all those links.
Absolutely. We'll put the links on the show notes so that people can easily find them. Johanna, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you, Vasco. I had a great time.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.